So my name's Andrew Hogue, and I'm a professor in the Game Development Entrepreneurship Program at UOIT. And so we're just sort of going to introduce the project that we've been working on a little while. It's now just starting off, and we have about a year and a half, or a year and a little bit to sort of come up with results. It's called iGO3D, and it's all about stereoscopic 3D, and sort of trying to put some research and backing into some of the design guidelines that developers are having either challenges with, or if someone's telling you that you should be doing this instead of that. Well, what we're going to be doing is sort of looking at those design guidelines that developers are using, and actually going forward and doing experiments scientifically to see what are the sort of perceptual boundaries of these type of parameters, and what are the parameters that are interesting from a design perspective that you can use to be better developers, to create better stereoscopic content. So this is in partnership with a variety of people. Most notably, we have funding from the Ontario Media Development Corporation and OCE. But this is a large cluster partnership fund that is sort of in collaboration with a variety of universities. We have University of Waterloo, York University, Western, OCAD, and the S3D Gaming Alliance is partnering with us as well as industry partners, Digital Extremes, Battle Games, Big Blue Bubble, EA, VFX Junction, and Interactive Ontario as well, sort of to help give us sort of the developer perspective on stereoscopic 3D. So we've sort of been noticing a few trends in video games over the last few years, and this is, while this is not related to stereoscopic 3D per se, it's sort of interesting to note the convergence of all these technologies. We're seeing, the use of our bodies now as a fundamental choice from a developer perspective, and actually creating new content to actually engage us even more. That being said, we finally have manufacturers on board for stereoscopic 3D and also these type of motion devices and so on. This is probably one of the first times that we've seen manufacturers of TVs and consumer electronics actually go full force with stereoscopic 3D, which is probably one of the first key elements of getting the technology into the consumer. And that I believe is sort of the key point. Now that the technology exists, it's not a technological issue anymore, and that means that we have to focus on content. S3D is here in games. We have Nintendo 3DS. Who's played the Nintendo 3DS? Who has one? Like 3 people. So I have it. It's great. It's really interesting. And there's a lot more interesting 3D content for games that are coming out soon. According to Wikipedia, the most reliable source on the internet, there are at least 42 stereoscopic 3D PlayStation 3 games either existing or announced. And with, obviously David could probably talk about Sony's position on stereoscopic 3D, but it's certainly it seems to be a good push forward on stereoscopic 3D front for games. That being said, none of this technology is new. This is sort of the interesting thing that comes from Bill Buxton's talk, if you were at Bill Buxton's keynote just a minute ago, is that none of this technology is brand new. No one has just invented this in the last little while. This has been around, if you've noticed, the Virtual Boy for a long time. And the Virtual Boy was not new. If you look to on the right there, that's a stereoscope that was invented in the 1800s, okay? So this has been around, this technology has been around for years. He talks about the 20-year long nose. And this is interesting because, when was the Virtual Boy? Probably one of the first sort of consumer-ish stereoscopic 3D display for games. When was that? It was in the 80s. So now it's 20 years later, so 30 years later. And so it's kind of interesting to sort of see this sort of convergence in the consumer level. More importantly, at the bottom you'll see that stereoscopic 3D is definitely not new in other areas as well. It's just new to you in a consumer area. It's been used for years for military training and virtual reality training scenarios, and in various incarnations using HMDs or projection technology, or even large, huge virtual reality displays that were really expensive in the labs. But it sort of pinpoints a couple of interesting bits here. This is the top is a virtual display that I helped build as part of my master's at York University. It's a projection-based display. It's fully enclosed. You walk inside and the wall closes you in. I hope you're not claustrophobic. But you put on stereoscopic 3D glasses and you can see in 3D all around you. So we used to do fun things like in the bottom left there, Cave Quake. We built games for this, and it was really engaging and really interesting. This is sort of the interesting piece there, is that if you notice the trends in video games, you see this idea of using your bodies. And well, this idea of using your bodies in a virtual display in stereoscopic 3D for games is definitely not new. It's been around in these type of large displays for years. So there's a lot of really interesting research that has been gone on in the labs on human behavior, human perception, and sort of issues with interaction in these type of environments. And now, at a consumer level, we're starting to see these in consumer products, and the ability to do this stuff, bringing it to the home. And that means that we sort of have to look back at the research and make sure that we're really understanding the human perspective of this technology and how it impacts the design. So what makes or has made stereoscopic 3D interesting? Stereoscopic 3D in film is definitely not new. It was quite popular in the 50s. Very niche market, and it's kind of interesting. But what is the difference between film and video games? And we're seeing obviously a convergence here too. Film and video games are two technologies. The only interesting bit here, the difference is, well, obviously one is rendered in real time, and the other one is, pre-rendered and pre-visualized and produced independently. Interaction is a key part, which means that we have to understand the human in order to get them to interact with the system in a better way. And when you start layering stereoscopic 3D on top of it, we have to ensure that the design considerations are important. So, what are we doing in terms of the iGO3D project? We want to understand what constitutes a good user experience in stereoscopic 3D, and we want to look back at the research and say, this is what research in human perception and psychology has told us in the past. In virtual reality, does it still apply with today's technology? Does it still apply with today's game technology? How do we measure this? And we're going to try and figure out real ways and ask these questions. How do you actually measure the idea of a good user experience? Why would you want to do this? Because we want to be able to have and understand and create a model of how stereoscopic 3D influences human perception, human behavior, accuracy of interaction, and does it help us? Does it hurt us? In what ways does it help us? Or what ways does it hurt us? We want to create compelling experiences if you're a game developer, and design choices are the important factor here. And in creating good design choices requires us to understand the human, just like what Bill was saying. And I think that's really important to understand how it's not just making two cameras render left and right views, it's how does that piece of it actually influence the change in design to make players do something or engage in your system a little bit better. So that's really where we're at. One thing so I'm just sort of looking at as part of this project is sort of like this idea that there's how do we interact in systems with different levels of realism? So different poly counts, different types of visualizations or graphics. And so one of the things that we're looking at as stereoscopic 3D as a piece of that is does it help us in education? Does it help us in training? Does it help us in these sort of scenarios? This is a simulation that we've been working on for doctors and researcher applications with Mount Sinai doctors. And so we're using that as a platform, as well as looking at sort of how does stereoscopic 3D influence your accuracy, your behavior in these type of situations as well. Does it help the education? Does it hurt the education ability of the game? So that's really all I have. So feel free to send me an email or talk to me afterwards. I'd love to chat with you. Or Neil Schneider, who is definitely right there. He's our project manager for this project as well. So thank you.